There's a strange kind of timing to certain truths. They don't appear when you're searching, and they don't arrive when you're asking. They show up at the exact moment something in you quietly unlocks. A moment so subtle that you rarely notice it. And yet here you are, at the edge of a message that would have slipped past you even a few months ago. Before we go any further, let me tell you something that will shape the next hour of your life. You are not here by coincidence. People say that all the time, but this time it's different. Because the concept I'm about to reveal is something most humans never discover, not because it's hidden, but because they aren't able to hold it until a very particular moment in their evolution. And if you're here listening to these words, then whether you realize it or not, that moment has arrived for you. Let's begin with a hook that very few people have the capacity to recognize in themselves. Your reality is repeating something, and you've never questioned why. Not repeating experiences in a superficial sense, like the same job frustrations, the same relationship patterns, the same moments of stagnation. No, this is deeper. I'm talking about the quiet pulse underneath your life, the invisible rhythm you return to again and again, no matter how far you stretch beyond it. Most people never notice this rhythm. They blame luck, or circumstances, or timing, or destiny, but they never look at the one place where the real reason lives, the internal field that calibrates everything they experience. Take a moment right now and do something simple. Notice your breath, not the breath you take when you're calm or stressed, but the breath you live in most of the time. That familiar inhale, that familiar exhale, the body's way of finding its default. Now stretch that idea a little further. What if your entire reality had a default too? What if your life kept returning to a baseline you didn't consciously set yet faithfully maintained? And what if that baseline is the reason why you rise only so high, fall only so low, and orbit within a range that feels strangely consistent no matter what you do? Here's where your attention sharpens, because whether you realize it or not, something in you knows I'm telling the truth. Your life has a pattern, a limit, a threshold, a line you do not cross even when you try. You felt it before, haven't you? That invisible boundary, that quiet, this is as far as things go. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not emotional. It's subtle, like a hum beneath your existence. And the moment you try to expand beyond it, something pulls you back to what feels strangely normal. The way water levels itself, the way a heartbeat returns to rhythm, the way a pendulum seeks its center. What if that center isn't determined by your dreams, but by something else entirely? Before we reveal the truth behind that question, or truth you've likely never heard spoken this way, I want you to sit in the curiosity of it. Because curiosity is the doorway. It opens something in your field that logic alone cannot touch. Notice what happens in your body when you imagine the possibility that you've been living within an invisible boundary your entire life. Notice the slight quickening in your chest, the way your awareness sharpens, the way part of you leans closer to this moment. That sensation is important. It means your field is listening. You see, there are ideas that the mind can understand, and then there are ideas that require the entire field, mind, body, identity, nervous system, and the subtle layers of consciousness to be ready before they can be absorbed. The concept that's coming next falls into the second category. Most humans never reach the point where this particular truth becomes available to them. Not because it's secret, not because it's guarded, but because this truth requires stability. It requires coherence. It requires a certain level of inner readiness that cannot be forced. If you're here, it's because that readiness has formed inside you quietly over years. Let me ask you something softly. Have you ever noticed how you can rise beyond your old life for a while? New habits, new beliefs, new manifestations, new relationships, and yet somehow, eventually, you drift back to what feels familiar. Maybe not exactly the same circumstance, but the same emotional texture, the same internal climate, the same level of peace, or chaos, or abundance, or discomfort. As if your life is tethered to a specific emotional altitude. This is not failure, it's not self-sabotage, it's not psychology, it's physics, inner physics. And in a few minutes, I'm going to name the mechanism behind it, a mechanism that determines the lowest level your reality will ever fall to, and the highest level it will consistently maintain. A mechanism so foundational to human experience that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But not yet. For now, breathe. Place your attention on the area just behind the sternum, the center of the chest, where your awareness gathers when you're about to understand something important. Notice the slight temperature there, the subtle pulse, the sensation of expansion or contraction. This part of your body knows truth before your mind does. It knows when a message is meant for you. It knows when you're on the edge of a threshold. And right now, whether you're sitting or lying down or listening in motion, that center is responding. You might feel a pulling, a soft opening, a quiet recognition, a sense that something is aligning. That sensation is the signal that your field is preparing to hold what's coming. And so we begin here at the doorway, not of knowledge, but of capacity. Because what I'm about to reveal will not change your life because you understand it. It will change your life because you're finally able to receive it. There is a difference, a profound one. In a moment, we will step into the pattern beneath your patterns, the part of you that decides the kind of reality you always return to, no matter how far you wander from it. A part of you that has been shaping everything, your relationships, your finances, your peace, your chaos, your expansion, your contractions. And you've walked side by side with this pattern your entire life without ever seeing it. Until now. You're ready. Your field can hold it. And because it can, this message has arrived. There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when you begin to notice that your life has never been random. Not once, not ever. The unfolding of your experiences may have felt unpredictable on the surface, but beneath every rise and fall, beneath every chapter and change, there has always been a pattern, a signature rhythm. Not a destiny fixed in stone, but a kind of internal gravity, a pull, a return, a familiarity that your inner world never drifts too far from, even when the outer world shifts dramatically. And it's here, in this recognition, that your awareness begins to sharpen. Think back for a moment, not to the big events of your life, but to the tone that sits beneath them. You've had seasons of expansion, where things flow, where abundance rises, where relationships feel nourishing, where creativity moves easily through you. And you've had seasons of contraction, where you retreat, regroup, return to something more familiar. But have you noticed that no matter how high you rise or how low you fall, you tend to return to a very specific emotional climate? A level of self-worth that feels normal, a level of financial stability that feels expected, a level of love or support or chaos or clarity that feels strangely like home. This is not coincidence, it is calibration. Your nervous system, your subconscious, and your field all participate in a kind of emotional homeostasis. a stabilizing principle woven into the body-mind. It's the same mechanism that brings your heartbeat back to rhythm after fear, the same mechanism that returns your breath to its familiar depth after a shock, the same mechanism that pulls your focus back to what it knows how to navigate. This internal stabilizer doesn't ask whether what it returns you to is good or bad, nourishing or limiting. It simply brings you back to what feels known. And so certain experiences linger in your life because they match this internal known. Certain opportunities slip away because they exceed it. Certain relationships collapse because they challenge it. Certain patterns remain because you are calibrated to them, not consciously but somatically, through the body, through the field, through the invisible architecture of expectation. Let's make this real. Maybe you've noticed that no matter how difficult things become, you never truly drop below a certain level. You always find a way to stabilize, to rebuild, to regain control. That baseline is not random. It's the lower threshold your internal field refuses to fall past. Or maybe you've experienced the opposite. Things start going well, beautifully well, and just as you rise into new territory, something in you begins to tighten. You feel a flicker of unfamiliarity. The nervous system tenses, a whisper of unworthiness rises, and soon your life returns to something you've seen before. A familiar level of success, a familiar level of struggle, a familiar emotional tone. This too is calibration. You're not being punished. You're not cursed. You're not sabotaging yourself. You are returning to a level of reality that your field knows how to hold. The body field is not just a poetic phrase. It's an electromagnetic system with measurable properties. Every emotion generates a frequency. Every belief shapes the coherence of your field. Every memory imprints a pattern. And collectively, these patterns form a stabilization point. The emotional altitude you live at day after day, regardless of what appears on the outside. Your life rises and falls around this internal altitude. Scientists call it homeostatic baseline. Psychologists call it self-image. Somatic practitioners call it the nervous system's set point. And mystics have always understood it as the soul's remembered resonance. Different languages, same truth. Your field organizes your reality around what it believes you can sustain, not what you desire, not what you hope for, not what you intellectually think you're worthy of, what you can sustain. And this is where the subtle pain lives, because you may want more. More abundance, more love, more peace, more expansion. But if your internal system cannot hold it, it will release it. If the emotional altitude of your life rises beyond what your field recognizes as safe, the field will contract, recalibrate, and return you to what it knows how to metabolize. This doesn't make you flawed, it makes you human. Your internal field has spent years, even decades, learning how to survive at a particular emotional level. And now, as you grow, as you awaken, as you evolve, the old calibration is becoming too small for you. You can feel the tension between who you were and who you're becoming. That tension is the early signal that your life is preparing to transform. But first, you must see the pattern beneath your patterns, because until you see it, you will think your life is repeating itself through fate or failure rather than through familiarity. Let's go deeper. Close your eyes for a moment in your mind's awareness and recall something. The last time something good began to enter your life. A new relationship, a new opportunity, a new level of abundance. And notice how your body reacted. Did you lean in fully with confidence, or did you feel a quiet shrinking, a hesitation, a subtle fear? That contraction isn't a lack of desire, it's a lack of capacity. Your field was meeting something it didn't realize it was allowed to hold, and the opposite is true as well. When life collapses, when unexpected difficulty arrives, notice how quickly you stabilize. Notice how you find resilience. Notice how you gather yourself. That's the lower stabilization point, the part of your field that refuses to fall beneath what it knows you can handle. This too is calibration. This too is part of the pattern. Here is the question that begins to form now. If you have a lower threshold to what you will tolerate, do you also have an upper threshold to what you will allow? And if so, has that upper threshold been shaping your entire life without your awareness? The answer is yes. And in the next movement, we will reveal exactly what that threshold is. The secret stabilizer beneath your entire reality, the quiet limit you've been living within, the internal flaw your life always returns to. Most people never see it, most people never name it, most people never even know it exists, but you're hearing this because your field is finally ready to hold the truth of what comes next. And once you see the mechanism beneath your life, the threshold that has quietly governed your relationships, your finances, your peace, your expansion, everything begins to change, and we're about to name it. And when we do, your old reality will no longer make sense. Everything you felt rising inside you since the beginning of this video, the curiosity, the recognition, the subtle pulse of readiness, has been preparing you to see the mechanism beneath your life. And now that mechanism begins to reveal itself. You have lived your entire existence with an invisible flaw beneath your reality. A quiet, internal threshold that determines the lowest version of life you'll tolerate, and the highest version you can consistently hold. This threshold is not emotional preference. It is not mindset. It is not a goal or a dream. It is the baseline frequency your field stabilizes around, the place your nervous system returns to, the expectation your subconscious maintains, the emotional altitude your body recognizes as normal. This is the architecture beneath your patterns, the gravitational field beneath your choices, the silent standard beneath your destiny. Take a breath here. Let this land. Because what you're about to understand is that you have never truly been manifesting from your desires. You have been manifesting from this internal flaw, this unspoken minimum, the level your field believes you can sustain without breaking. Every rise in your life, every fall, every deviation, every breakthrough, every setback, they have all been expressions of this stabilizing point. You rise until you hit your threshold. You fall until you reach it. And no matter how wide the swing, no matter how dramatic the journey, you always return to this familiar altitude. This is not limitation. This is physics. Your electromagnetic field holds coherence only within a certain range. When you exceed that range, whether through sudden abundance, unexpected success, deep love, or profound peace, the field cannot stabilize the new frequency. It contracts, it recalibrates, it returns you to what feels familiar, even if that familiar place is painful. Likewise, when life collapses beneath what your field recognizes as your lowest acceptable level, your system rises, you stabilize, you rebuild, because falling below your internal minimum creates too much incoherence. And here is the part that will echo through your consciousness long after this video ends. Your life is not shaped by what you want, but by what your field refuses to drop below. This internal flaw is your energetic minimum, not what you dream of, not what you affirm, not what you visualize, but what your system believes is the lowest level of safety you can emotionally sustain. The reason you experience the same emotional patterns again and again is because your minimum remains unchanged. The reason certain relationships collapse the moment they exceed your familiar level of intimacy is because they rise beyond your upper threshold. The reason financial abundance comes and goes is because your field only stabilizes at a certain altitude. The reason expansion feels temporary is because unfamiliarity creates contraction. The reason your biggest breakthroughs feel fleeting is because the internal floor has not risen to hold them. Your life has never been random. It has been rhythmic. And deeper still, this rhythmic stabilization is not psychological. It is somatic, cellular, electromagnetic. Every cell in your body emits biophotonic light that fluctuates with your emotional state. Every thought shifts the coherence patterns of your heart's electromagnetic field. Every belief modifies the oscillation of your nervous system. When these three systems, cellular, emotional, and electromagnetic, synchronize, they create a baseline vibration. And that vibration becomes the invisible floor of your reality. Let's bring this closer to home. Think of the relationships you've stayed in longer than you should have. Not because they were aligned, but because they matched a familiar emotional climate. Think of the opportunities you lost not because you weren't ready, but because your field couldn't stabilize at that altitude. Think of the moments when life was expanding beautifully. And then, without warning, everything contracted. Not because it wasn't meant to be, but because your field exceeded its familiar range. This is the unseen mechanism, not destiny, not luck, not timing, calibration. You are calibrated to a certain level of reality. And until now, you have been unconsciously maintaining that calibration, rising and falling around the same emotional floor. But now that you can see it, truly see it, the pattern loses its invisibility. The moment a pattern becomes visible, it loses its dominance. Awareness disrupts the automatic. Recognition loosens the contraction. Seeing the floor begins to lift it. And that is why this message has arrived now. Because until your field was ready to hold the truth of this internal floor, revealing it would have been useless. But now, something in you has shifted, your capacity has expanded, your coherence has increased, your field can finally hold the magnitude of this understanding. And because it can, the next part of your life can begin. In the next movement, we step into the moment your internal floor rises. The moment where the rhythm of your life changes and a new level of reality begins to form beneath your feet. You can always tell when your life is about to shift because the smallest details begin to feel different. Not dramatic, not loud, just different. You catch yourself saying no faster. Your body reacts sooner. Your tolerance evaporates for things you used to endure. It's subtle but unmistakable. Something inside stops bending the way it once did. Something inside is done going backward. Expansion doesn't always begin with inspiration. Sometimes it begins with refusal. That refusal is the first sign that your internal floor has started to rise. People misunderstand transformation because they focus on the high points, the breakthrough, the clarity, the vision. But the real pivot point, as the actual mechanism, is much quieter. You stop allowing yourself to drop below a certain emotional or energetic level. You stop entertaining patterns you recognize as too small. Your field recalibrates before your mind catches up. A higher minimum begins forming beneath your feet, and you feel it not as excitement, but as stability. Stability is the first language of elevation. When the internal floor rises, the world doesn't change in a single sweep. What changes is your response to it. Old versions of you would have absorbed certain behaviors, tolerated certain dynamics, rationalized certain imbalances. The version of you emerging now doesn't. Not because you're becoming harsh, but because your nervous system no longer identifies those states as home. The human field is highly intelligent. Once it upgrades its baseline, it stops attaching to anything that vibrates below it. Watch your life closely when this happens. The shifts won't look mystical at first. They'll look practical. You'll send the message you used to avoid. You'll walk away faster. You'll pause before reacting. You'll let silence do the work. You'll choose environments that don't drain your signal. That quiet discernment is the early architecture of your new altitude. This stage of transformation often feels confusing to people because collapse and expansion occur at the same time. The old structures weaken, the new structures haven't fully formed. You're standing in the in-between, but the in-between is where the floor lifts. It's where your field releases anything too small and prepares you for what will match the new altitude. If you look back, you'll see you've done this before. There was a time when you tolerated less love than you do now, less respect, less opportunity, less internal peace. At some point, without ceremony, you outgrew those versions of your life. And once you outgrew them, they couldn't remain. They didn't disappear because they were wrong. They disappeared because your field could no longer stabilize around them. Your minimum rose and reality adjusted. This is the law at play here. The universe does not meet your desires, it meets your floor. Raise the floor, and everything built above it rises with it. You've probably noticed this in relationships more than anything else. Think of the versions of you that once accepted bare minimum affection, the friendships where you carried the weight, the connections where you felt unseen. You didn't leave those because you suddenly wanted more. You left because your field stopped recognizing that dynamic as sustainable. When your minimum rises, misalignment becomes physically uncomfortable. This is not emotional sensitivity, it's energetic integrity. There's also the financial version of this. You might remember a time in your life when dropping below a certain income felt normal. That was the old floor. Then something shifted, a new level of stability formed. And suddenly falling back to that old number felt impossible. Even in difficult seasons, you found your way above it again. That wasn't circumstantial luck. That was your field refusing to stabilize below its upgraded threshold. Elevation always reveals itself first through the things you no longer collapse into. Another sign, your internal dialogue shifts. You stop negotiating against yourself. Doubt loses its authority. Fear still appears, but it doesn't get to steer. There's a neutrality to your presence, to be not the neutrality of indifference, but the neutrality of someone who has finally recalibrated to a higher emotional altitude, neutrally grounded, neutrally worthy, neutrally clear. When the minimum rises, worthiness stops being a concept and becomes a nervous system reality. And then something extraordinary happens. Life starts rearranging itself without requiring force. Opportunities that match the new floor begin to appear. Connections that resonate at higher coherence drift naturally into your orbit. Your creativity moves differently, cleaner, more honest, more aligned. Your choices stabilize. Your boundaries soften but strengthen. You feel less reactive, more intentional, more anchored. The external world obeys the instructions of your internal minimum. Quantum physics explains this through coherence fields, the phenomenon where higher frequency systems reorganize lower frequency systems in their presence. Mystics explain it as resonance. Psychology explains it as identity. Biology explains it as homeostasis. Different languages, same truth. Once your baseline shifts, Your entire environment must follow. But the deepest magic is in how you experience it internally. You'll start noticing that certain emotional states, anxiety, scarcity, insecurity, don't last as long. They don't burrow into you. They don't become your home. They pass through because your field no longer stabilizes at those altitudes. Your system has learned a new normal, and the body always returns to the new normal. This is the moment where your old self can no longer pull you down, not because you fight it, because you've evolved beyond its gravitational reach. Feel that truth in your chest right now. There's a subtle widening behind the sternum when you recognize that you've already begun rising. Not tomorrow, not next season, now. You've already rejected things you once tolerated. You've already exceeded patterns you once repeated. You've already stepped into a version of yourself who cannot descend to old emotional altitudes. This isn't aspiration. This is recalibration. And the next stage of your evolution begins when you integrate this new minimum into your identity. When you stop acting like someone who is trying to rise and start living like someone who already has. A higher life doesn't begin when circumstances change. It begins when you stop behaving like the previous version of yourself. The real shift happens the moment you stop performing stability and begin embodying it. And that change is not loud. It doesn't rush through you like a revelation. It arrives in the way your presence settles, in the way your choices sharpen, in the way your body begins to recognize a new emotional altitude as home. This is the quiet power of becoming your new baseline. And once it begins, nothing in your life can remain the same. There's a very specific sensation that arises when your identity begins aligning with a higher internal minimum. It's a kind of internal coherence that feels less like confidence and more like inevitability, as if the version of you who used to bargain with your worth has stepped aside, as if the self who once accepted less has dissolved. You no longer feel the pull to go backward because the backward version of you is no longer accessible. The old self isn't resisting. It's simply gone. This shift is not a mindset, it's a physiological recalibration. Your nervous system is learning that the emotional altitude you once treated as high is now the ground beneath your feet. Your cells begin to organize around it. Your breath anchors into it. Your choices express it, and most importantly, your expectations rise to meet it without effort. The truth is, your life doesn't expand because you finally want more. Your life expands because you finally expect more. And expecting more is not about entitlement, it is about recognition. Recognition of the fact that the old baseline was never your destiny, it was just your conditioning. So let's begin here. You are not becoming someone new. You are stabilizing into someone you were always meant to be. Identity integration is not about adding anything. It's about removing what no longer fits your field. And that removal happens automatically when your minimum rises. You stop internalizing the narratives that kept you small. You stop engaging with dynamics that drain your frequency. You stop chasing validation from places that cannot meet you. You stop negotiating with a self that lived at a lower altitude. This isn't effort, this is resonance. When your internal field adopts a higher baseline, the identity that matches that baseline emerges on its own. You start doing things that felt impossible months ago. You speak more clearly, you choose more honestly, you trust your own perception, you operate from a form of self-respect that feels less like a decision and more like a gravitational law. This is where life becomes beautifully simple. Not easy, simple. You do not argue for your worth. You do not justify your boundaries. You do not shrink to make others comfortable. You do not stay where your spirit is contracting. You do not self-abandon to maintain connection, not because you're trying to be strong, but because the version of you who tolerated such things no longer exists at this altitude. This is the invisible miracle of identity evolution. You stop fighting for your next level and become the person who lives there. That shift is far more powerful than any visualization, affirmation, or manifestation technique, because manifestation doesn't respond to desire, it responds to identity. And identity is shaped by the baseline your field has accepted as true. When your minimum rises, your identity follows. And as your identity shifts, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your emotional reactions begin aligning with your new floor. You no longer spiral in the ways you once did. You don't collapse under pressure. You don't chase. You don't beg your reality to change. You don't tense your way through fear. Even discomfort feels different. Not like a threat, but like a signal that something old is leaving the system. You begin to trust yourself on a cellular level. That trust is what stabilizes the new floor, far more than willpower or discipline ever could. Trust becomes the architecture that holds your new timeline in place. Let's bring this closer to your lived experience. Think of a recent moment where your reaction surprised you because it was calmer than your past self would have been. You didn't fall apart. You didn't revert. You didn't lose yourself. That wasn't maturity. That wasn't coping. That was your field stabilizing at a higher frequency. That was the new baseline quietly taking over. Or consider the moment you felt an internal no before words were spoken. A clean, grounded, immediate clarity that rose before any reasoning. That wasn't intuition alone, that was identity coherence. That was your new minimum signaling that the old pattern wasn't allowed anymore. This is integration in its purest form, when your body, your field, and your identity speak the same language. And what happens next is something almost magical. You begin to attract experiences, opportunities, and people who match this coherence, not because you're manifesting them, but because your presence has become a filter. Anything that resonates below your new baseline simply cannot enter or stay. Anything that resonates above it becomes easier to receive. The world becomes less about pursuit and more about alignment. Alignment is effortless when your identity matches your field. This is also where your relationship with discomfort evolves. Expansion no longer causes panic. You no longer sabotage when things get good. You no longer shrink from your own power. The upper limits dissolve because you're no longer trying to reach something. You're stabilizing something. The new altitude feels organic, natural, familiar. You belong there, and that sense of belonging is the true indicator that your identity has integrated the rise. Pause here. Feel that word, belonging. You belong at this level of clarity. You belong at this level of peace. You belong at this level of coherence. You belong at this level of self-respect. You belong at this level of possibility. This is not arrogance. This is resonance. When the new baseline becomes part of your identity, your reality begins to reorganize with astonishing speed. Timelines shift, opportunities stabilize, connections become cleaner, intuition sharpens, creativity intensifies. You are no longer visiting a higher frequency, why, you are living from it. And now that your identity has risen to meet your new floor, the final stage of this journey emerges, the moment where that baseline becomes the quiet center of your entire existence, the place your life will rise from again and again without effort. Integration isn't marked by celebration. It's recognized by the moment your new baseline feels unremarkable, not exciting, not unfamiliar, simply yours. That's when you know the rise is complete, when the emotional altitude that once felt aspirational becomes the air you breathe without noticing. Not because you forced yourself into a new identity, but because your body has decided quietly and conclusively that this is where you live now. You'll feel this shift in the softest ways. Mornings will begin with a steadier pulse. Conversations will land differently in your chest. Situations that once triggered deep contraction will barely ripple through your field. There's no grand revelation, just a subtle, unmistakable sense that your internal gravity has strengthened. You're not lifting yourself anymore. You're standing. You're not climbing. You've arrived. And what used to destabilize you simply can't reach you at this altitude. People often imagine that transformation ends with fireworks, but that's not how the nervous system works. Lasting elevation feels like quiet neutrality, like the absence of panic, like the absence of collapse, like the absence of needing to fight for the space you now occupy. You begin to notice how differently life organizes itself around this stillness. Opportunities mature instead of evaporating. Relationships settle instead of fluctuating. Growth feels rhythmic instead of sporadic. Your outer world begins mirroring the baseline your inner world has already accepted. And in this phase, a remarkable recognition emerges. Your past no longer feels like a threat. You can think of old versions of yourself without slipping into them. You can remember old patterns without reviving them. You can revisit old memories without reenacting their emotions. That's when you know the floor has solidified. The past loses its power because it no longer matches your resonance. It simply doesn't fit. You can look at who you were and feel nothing but clarity. This is not detachment, it's coherence. Coherence is the true signal that your field has integrated the rise. Your thoughts, your breath, your reactions, your expectations, all aligned with the same internal altitude. It feels like being centered in your body in a way you've never been before, as though something has clicked into place at the level of bone and breath. Even your silence changes. It becomes firmer, clearer, more spacious. You speak less to prove yourself and more to express truth. You move less to chase outcomes and more to align with them. You no longer grip reality. You let it unfold through the version of yourself that now exists. From this center, everything becomes easier, not because life removes its challenges, but because you're no longer interpreting those challenges through the lens of your old flaw. You aren't destabilized by uncertainty, but you respond. You aren't consumed by fear, you navigate it. You aren't fragmented by doubt, you meet it with presence. Instead of collapsing inward, you expand outward. Instead of shrinking, you anchor. Instead of spiraling, you breathe. This is the architecture of a higher baseline. Your entire field begins operating with the intelligence of someone who no longer expects the worst, someone who no longer assumes collapse, someone who no longer takes ownership of pain that isn't theirs, someone who doesn't abandon themselves to maintain connection, someone who doesn't apologize for standards that protect their coherence. At this altitude, your life becomes shaped by clarity rather than fear. And now the message that opened this journey returns, but it lands differently than it did before. At the beginning, you were told that this message arrives precisely when your field can hold it. You heard those words with curiosity, maybe even disbelief. But now, you understand them from a different place in yourself. You've lived your way into their meaning. The concept revealed in this video was not meant for who you were. It was meant for the version of you emerging now. The version capable of holding a higher baseline without collapsing back into old patterns. Feel how those words resonate differently in your chest now. They no longer feel like a prophecy. They feel like a confirmation. Your field can hold this. That's why the message arrived. Not as an idea, but as a frequency-matching event, a meeting of information and readiness, a synchrony between what you're becoming and what you are finally capable of absorbing. And because your field can hold it, something subtle yet permanent has already shifted. The old floor is gone. The old altitude no longer exists. You are not fighting to maintain this new level. You're stabilizing inside it. And from this stability, your entire life will begin to reorganize with a precision you could never achieve through sheer effort. This is the final truth of elevation. You do not rise to your desires. You rise to the level of yourself that can sustain them. And you have now become that version. Take a breath and feel the stillness beneath these words. Feel the quiet in your chest. Feel the steadiness in your spine. Feel the clarity in your mind. This is your new baseline. This is the center you will rise from again and again. This is the frequency that will shape every timeline ahead. And now that you can hold it, the rest of your life is free to begin.